Okay. The Lord is good, a stronghold, a day of trouble. He knows them that trust in him. Salvation is of the Jews. He's the only true God, and Jesus Christ who he sent. And Moses who he sent, and Elijah, and Isaiah, and Ezekiel. He's the one who created Israel, 12 sons of Jacob, which grew over a period of about 400 years into a large family of at least 1 million people, somewhere in that neighborhood. The only wise God, the only one that has immortality, invisible and immortal, living in the light that no man has seen or can see. So here we are at part 7, the false doctrine in the book of Revelation. It's going to say the book of false revelation. The book of mythology revelation. The book of mythological revelation. How's that? It's mythological, this book. It's really a myth. People keep believing it, but it's really a myth that all these things were going to happen soon, and of course they never did, and they're all ridiculous, preposterous statements. They're all, just about everything in the book is preposterous. It doesn't fit in with what usually goes on in this world. No. By no means. So we're starting at Revelation 7, 1 through 5. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. Why? It's never said. So it's never said why these angels were doing this, but it's very dramatic. There's a lot of drama in that statement. Since when do the angels stand on the 4 corners? I mean, it's a wild and crazy thing to say, but it never says why. Why? No explanation is given, okay? But the book makes a lot of crazy statements like this, wild and crazy. And I saw another angel ascending from the east. What does that mean? Having the seal of the living God. Oh, so we're to assume that all the other angels that they were mentioning didn't have the seal of the living God? So this one had the seal. Wow. Apparently the other ones didn't have it. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. And more angels to hurt the earth. Now he's going to hurt the sea too. Saying, hurt not the earth, or the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed, here we go, the servants of our God in their foreheads. And here we go. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed in 144,000, otherwise known as 144,000, of all the tribes of the children of Israel. And then it says, of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. And it goes on. I didn't write them all. But it goes through the 12 tribes. And it says that supposedly 12,000 were from each tribe. But that's totally ridiculous. The 12 tribes don't even exist anymore. Well, they don't exist now. They did back then. But they don't they don't really exist now. There's been too much intermarriage. There's been way too much intermarriage between all the tribes. So all the tribes are blended together with all the rest of the world. They found that everybody has some DNA from what they believe is the original 12 tribes. Everybody. And so that's ridiculous to think that that would happen now. It just never would. And there isn't too much more said about this at this point, but then later, in later chapters, we find out, shockingly, that all these people are virgins, male virgins. And it's not right. And that makes it even more crazy. That makes it even more preposterous, unplausible, and ridiculous. And then I wrote a little summary of the rest of the chapter. These 144,000 are like the only ones that are really saved. This is the impression you're given. I mean, it's just insanity. I had a Jehovah's Witness tell me one time that only the 144,000 would be saved. They're the only ones that'll ever be saved. This is what the man told me. He believed it, apparently. So I wrote out a little summary of the chapter. The rest of the chapter says that all the saved people will serve God in his temple and his throne, which apparently is, forgot that word, where God is located now. That's what it says. And then I wrote, and God will live with them. But later in the book, it says that God will live in the 1,500-mile city, New Jerusalem. So that's a contradiction. And so we'll get to that eventually, the 1,500-mile city that's going to fly from heaven, come down supposedly. That's just crazy. I mean, that's just ridiculous. To be limited to 1,500 miles and then, well, there's a lot more to that. I won't get into it now, but. So then we move to chapter 8, 1 through 13. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of an hour. And notice they don't say, supposedly Jesus is supposed to be opening these seals, but they never say, and Jesus opened the seventh seal, or Jesus opened the seal. They just say, he. Ridiculous. But I figured out why it says that there would be silence in heaven for a half hour. It's because it's a Sabbath. So God supposedly, of course, and we know that all this stuff is not true. He took a Sabbath in this story, this concocted story, from destroying things. So he was, instead of creating the earth in 6 days, he took 6 days to destroy the earth, and now he's taking a break. So that's why there was silence. They were taking a Sabbath from the devastation, from the mass murder and the destruction. And then verse 2, and I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Why? And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given to him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. This is Old Testament teaching right here. It's not New Testament. There's no commandments by Jesus or by any apostle that Christians should offer incense, that there's a need to offer incense in any way, especially not with the prayers. There's just no teaching like that. So that's an Old Testament practice under the old agreement, the old contract, the old covenant, the Old Testament. And so I found the verse in Leviticus, or a verse, there's a couple more. Leviticus 16:13, and he shall put the incense upon the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is upon the testimony, that he die not. So that was almost like an atonement. Sometimes God wanted them to do that, and it was an atonement. It was used as an atonement. And God wanted a specific type of incense. If you didn't use a specific type of incense, then that was a sin. And that's what killed the sons of Aaron. They didn't use the right incense, and so they were burned. They were just torched. God just torched them. He incinerated them. Instantly, apparently. You've heard of the fire of unknown origin. Well, this was a fire of origin from God. But they didn't know where it came from, because it came from God. It just came out of nowhere and took them out, the sons of Aaron. It goes on to say in verse 5, and the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. Remember, I said that in the last message, that there was actually an earthquake in heaven. But it doesn't really say where it was, but I assumed it was heaven, because it doesn't say it was on the earth. He cast the fire into the earth, and then it just says that there was voices, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake, but it doesn't say where. So I thought it was right there. It just doesn't say. And the question is, why? Why? There's no good reason for it. No reason is given. So then it moves on. It says, and the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. There's no such thing as that, as hail and fire mingled with blood. There's no such thing. Somebody dreamed that up. I don't know who. But there's no such thing on this earth. You could have hail, but, this is just not something that happens. And it says, and they were cast upon the earth. So supposedly God cast this hail, fire, and blood. And the third part of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. And that's it? So no other thing was hurt, the buildings, the people. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And no more is said about that. So supposedly with this strange hail and fire and blood, only a third, and keep in mind they're going to say this over and over and over, only a third. Just exactly a third. That's silly. Ridiculously silly. And then verse 8, and the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. There's another Old Testament plagiarism. The other thing was a copy, with the incense. They copied from the Old Testament and plagiarized it. And here's another one where they're saying that the sea became blood. And once again, this is going to happen a few times. A great mountain burning with fire. What is that? So it's a big fireball. They should have just said a fireball. So it was a giant fireball, but really wasn't because it didn't happen. It never happened. It's somebody's wild imagination where they want God to do all these supernatural things, but he has other plans. So here's the verse in Exodus 7:17. Thus saith the Lord, in this you, I'm in the mood to change the thou, in this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in my hand. I got to change this language. I wanted to do it, but I never really saw anything that I stuck out. I will smite with the rod that is in my hand on the waters. I will smite with the rod that is in my hand on the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. You see? So that's what he did back in the day. That's what God did. And so they just copied that. They took all these different occurrences from the Old Testament and they created their own book. Whoever did this book of Revelation. And then it says in verse 9, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. And the third part of the ships were destroyed. Why? Why were they destroyed? The river was turned into blood back here. A third part of the sea became blood. Why would they be destroyed? Because of the blood. They would just go through the water, right? It's ridiculous anyway. But I realized God didn't even kill any creatures in the ocean when he had the great flood. When Noah's flood happened, and all cultures believe in a great flood. I haven't read the accounts of all of them, but I have read that you can find a record of the great flood, Noah's flood, God's flood, in all cultures. And I thought about it, and I said, wow, God didn't kill any creatures in the sea because they thought it was great. Now they could go swimming over the land because the land was covered in water and explore different areas. They had a much bigger domain at that point until the waters receded and they lost the ability to do that, and then they had to go back out into the ocean. But none of them would have died. They were in their element. All creatures that exist in the water were having a great time during the flood. None of them died. None of them. But here, this book is claiming that God is killing them. Well, that doesn't agree. And then notice how it says a third part. Only a third. And only a third of the ships. In verse 10, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star. Here we go again with another star. We already had that at least one time. It's hard to keep track of all these things. You'd have to make a list of all these things to try to look at them. The book has already said that a great star fell, and if a great star fell, then the whole earth would be destroyed anyway. A great star? That's ridiculous. Because a great star would be a sun. If a sun hit the earth, it would just completely wipe it right out. Burning, as it were, a lamp, and it fell on the third part of the rivers. Only a third part. That's all. And on the fountains of waters. What's that mean? So only on the rivers and on the fountains. What's a fountain of water? Fountains of water come up and create lakes. Or rivers, I suppose. And the name of the star is called wormwood. Well, that just means bitter. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Well, no, nobody would have died because they would have just purified the water. That's all. We can purify water. They're not going to drink water that's obviously poison. And we already have poison water everywhere. If people drank the water that they pipe into houses, they'd all die within short order. And many do probably from that, who refuse to drink purified water. If anybody just says, well, I'm just going to drink this tap water, good luck to you. You'll be taken out soon. And I'm sure there's some areas where the water isn't that bad, but most of the places I've lived, the water is terrible. You know, well water can be full of minerals. It's, you know, very unhealthy to drink it. I did live in one house where the water was clean. So, moving on, verse 12. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was hit. And the third part of the moon, see, this third part thing, you know. And the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them were darkened, as if all the stars in the galaxy have been hit and they don't shine anymore. That's just not possible. There's so many out there. Very unlikely that anything like that would happen. And the day shined not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. What do you mean, the night likewise? So the day shined not for 1/3 of the day, and then it's saying the night also did not shine light for a third part of it? So this is written very poorly. Or it's translated very poorly. Because it's not even clear what it's even saying. Because there's no day in the night. Hello. And then if there was 1/3 of the day was dark, then that would be night. So that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So then we have the plagiarism from that verse in Joshua 10:13. So this is where they copied, they stole that's a good word, they stole the account, created their own account in this book. Let me move that up. Joshua 10:13, and the sun stood still. See, back then they thought the sun moved every day, that it was moving up and down. They thought it went up, and then it came down. And then the next day it went up. They didn't know it's because the earth is rotating. They had no idea. So apparently God stopped the earth from rotating for a certain time. So it says, and the sun stood still, and the moon also, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So I looked up, I want to see if I can find that book of Jasher, and there is a book out there. I got a PDF of it, and I read a portion of it. And I read some of it, very short, a small amount of it, and I didn't like it. So then it says, so the sun stood still in the midst or the middle of heaven and did not go down about a whole day. I believe it. So then we move on to the next chapter. And I have 19 verses here. Let's see if I can get through these fairly quick. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven to the earth. Another star? Please. And to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Well, there's no such thing as a bottomless pit. No such thing. Even if it's 3,000 miles deep. Plus, there isn't any such thing. They've tried to drill down that far, and they couldn't even do it. There's no such thing as a bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there rose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And then, here we go. And there came out of the smoke locusts. Well, that word is defined as grasshoppers and the creatures in the grass or something like that in the Strong's Concordance. And so that's why they put the word locust there, but they're not locusts at all. So I don't understand. Why did they put the word locust there? Why did they say they were locusts? They weren't like locusts. They were like centaurs. They were half horse and half man. And I've got some pictures of them. So there came out of the smoke locusts on the earth, and to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth. Oh yeah, don't hurt any grass. Neither any green thing, no weeds either, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Well, according to this account, only the 144,000 have the seal of God in their foreheads. Nobody else has it. There's no other people in the world that have the anointing of God. And I just realized they don't even tell you what that means, the seal of God. Well, I'd say it would be the anointing. And so everybody else was going to be hurt by these creatures, which they haven't really described yet. They're just saying they're locusts. And they have power like scorpions. So in chapter 8, we just read this. I have this verse here. It said that all the green grass was burnt up. So he destroyed all the green grass and the whole planet. That's ridiculous. And then in the next chapter, they're claiming that they didn't want them to hurt any of the grass. Well, all the grass has been burnt up. There's no grass to, according to the account, the silly, ridiculous account, all the grass was already burnt up. But then they say, don't hurt the grass. Well, the grass has been burned. Sorry. So that's why I wanted to put this back here, this verse that we just read. Let me go to verse 5. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months, and their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he strikes a man. So everybody else in the world, except those 144,000, are being tormented. Everybody. So there are no other children of God, no people that are one with God, no people that believe in God, that know God, that have been born again or anything like that. Oh no. Just that 144,000. The rest of them are being tormented by these creatures that they haven't even, now they're going to describe them. And they're claiming that they have like the sting of a scorpion. And then verse 7, and the shapes of the locusts were like horses prepared to battle. And on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. Well, if they had the face of man, they don't have the teeth of lions. And there's another contradiction later where it says that they had the face of lions. So, in verse 9, and they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings, they had wings. I'm going to show you some pictures with wings on these centaurs. They're called centaurs. But we don't see any manifestation of them anymore. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like a scorpion, like scorpions. And there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. The whole earth. So here's your definition of a centaur. The centaurs were half horse and half human creatures who were depicted in Greek mythology. So here it is. I've got 5 or 10 pictures of these centaurs, which come from ancient societies, the Babylonians, the Greeks, whatever. And so you see that they have wings, just like they're describing. But we don't know of any people in the earth now in modern day that have seen any creatures like this anymore. There's no such thing. They see hybrids, but they don't see hybrids like this anymore. This book is from ancient history. So moving on to the next picture. Apparently they found a skeleton. I mean, look at it. I think it might be in Europe. It's on display in some museum. They actually found what they thought was an actual centaur, a physical centaur. That's what it looks like. That's all I know. And there's another photo of it later. Here's another concrete mold of another centaur facing a different direction. The same thing. These are Babylonian. Now here, I don't know what this is. It looks like maybe this is where they took the skeleton that you saw. Maybe it was embedded in the wall and they took it out of the wall, because it looks like a skeleton in the dirt, whether it be on the floor or on the ceiling or on the walls. Probably on the walls, I would think. Could have been on the floor. But it looks like maybe that's what you saw. That's what we just saw in the museum. So apparently they have physical evidence, but that's all I know. Here's another image of a centaur and a statue. Looks like it's in Egypt. You see an Egyptian statue right here, so it's probably in Egypt. And we go to the next one. This is another image of what a centaur was supposed to be like in battle or whatever. And then lastly, here's another up-close image of that skeleton, which is on display. Notice it says the centaur of whatever that is. Tymfi. And that is apparently a skeleton that was found in some excavation. So now we go back to where we were. Verse 14, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Now they're claiming angels are tied up in a river. I don't think so. That's silly. That's another ridiculous statement. Preposterous. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of the men. Once again, we see that third part of the men. So now we're killing a third part of the planet, of the people on the earth. Right now, a third part would be actually 2 billion people. So a third part now would be 2 billion humans. Ridiculous. Verse 16, and the number of the army of the horsemen. So then it just says in the next verse, 16, it just says, and the number of the army of the horsemen. So it's talking about the centaurs. It's calling them horsemen, which makes sense, right? We're 200,000, and I heard the number of them, 200 million. I wrote that in, 200 million. So supposedly this army of centaurs came up out of the earth, came out of this bottomless pit that doesn't exist. And there are 200 million centaurs. I think not. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire, and of jacinths and brimstone. So they're claiming that, that they had breastplates of brimstone. What? How do you have that? And the heads of the horses, here it is. Now they're saying the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, but they just said that they had the faces of men and they had the hair of women. So now they're saying they're the heads of lions, so they don't even know what they're saying. They just totally contradicted themselves, these writers, whoever put this together, this fantastical Fantasyland book. And it says, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. You can really see how concocted this is. They're claiming at this point, in this verse, that these, what they call locusts, and they're anything but a locust, they were breathing fire and smoke and brimstone. I think not. No way. And it says 18, by these 3 was a third part of men killed. I see. So at first it says, above it says, I just realized it says that they would be tormented for a certain amount of time. And then they're claiming that they killed 2 billion. Well, it'd be 2 billion now. Back then, it'd be a lot of people. But I'm not sure what the population of the world was back in the day that this was written. By the fire, by the smoke, by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. Well, I thought they were stung with tails, scorpion tails. It says, for their power is in their mouth and in their tails. Oh, it is in the tails. Yeah, but they didn't say how many were killed by the tails. For their tails were like serpents. I thought they were like scorpions. Now they're saying they're like serpents. A scorpion is not a serpent. A serpent is a snake. So now they're saying they're serpents' tails. But then before they said they were like scorpions. They're completely crazy, people that wrote this. And had heads. For the tails were like serpents. Just got rid of that unnecessary word. For their tails were like serpents, and had heads. They had heads? What are you talking about? And with them they do hurt. Well, in your imagination maybe, but not in reality.